Myles Turner speaks injury status, as well as Chris Duarte, Jalen Smith, Aaron Nesmith. Lots of injury updates already after one game. What did Myles say? What does it mean for the Pacers? We'll talk about that. Plus, Kevin Pritchard put out a nice statement yesterday, as well as contract extension stuff I didn't cover earlier this week. And the Pacers play twice in the next 2 days. So much to cover on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, boy, do we have a busier show than I expected. One at the top, Myles Turner talked about his injury situation, what happened, how long he'll be out, plus some updates from injuries on other guys and who's going to need to step up with Turner out. Lots to cover on that front already. It's the Pacers season, and it wouldn't be the Pacers season without some early season injuries like Victor Oladipo or Karis LeVert. It always seems to be the case. Then we'll talk about two things that happened this week on the team building front office side. I don't really know what to call it. Contract extension stuff that I kind of glossed over earlier this week, and Kevin Pritchard putting out kind of long statement before the game on Wednesday. And then at the end, we'll talk about the Spurs and Pistons, who the Pacers play this weekend. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Free and available on all platforms. Also, today's episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Let's dive in talking about Myles Turner. First of all, Myles Turner spoke to us at practice today. Good for him, man. Sometimes with these injury things, it can be so hard to get concrete answers from teams, from coaches, from players. And so for Myles himself to get up there in front of a camera, in front of a mic, and clear it all up, that he doesn't have to do that. And I really appreciate that he did that and that the Pacers allowed him to do that. So he did confirm that the story that was reported by Jake Fisher and Shams Charania was in fact what happened. He came out for warm-ups and ended up getting injured during that portion of before the game, during his warm-up portion. So the way that the warm-ups work is players have like blocks where they come out and they overlap with one other player. So Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nembhard were the group before Myles and TJ McConnell. And I was actually out there on the court when Myles came out originally. And he was doing some work with Lloyd Pierce, and then he was talking with Lloyd and Ben Mathurin off to the side for a little bit, and he looked fine. And then it was 5:10, and I'm giving you too much behind the scenes. It doesn't matter. But we have 5:15 is when our media with Rick Carlisle was for that game. So I thought, I better go get ready for that. And so, in a very tiny window, this happened because some people saw it before Rick Carlisle's pregame media availability. So sometime between 5:05 and 5:15, this happened where he's going through his pregame routine. He goes up for a shot or a rebound or something and comes down on someone's foot. He confirmed that himself when speaking, which I appreciate. He said, I was just going through my warm-ups and I stepped on someone's foot, didn't see who it was. So they're just totally unfortunate, and he called it a freak accident, which it is, but it's the first game, so it always seems weird when it's the first game, but it's a freak accident. Left ankle sprain for Turner. We'll get to timeline in a second, but I completely forgot about this part of this. The left side, the left leg, the left foot area, whatever you want to call it, is the foot that Turner had the stretch reaction in last season. And that explains, some people who saw it when he got hurt described him as really frustrated. I bet in his head there was some concern it was related to the foot, and he confirmed that it's not, which is great because he went to the tunnel and tried to walk it off and come back out to continue his warm-up and be ready to go. No relation from this ankle thing to the foot thing he had last year, which is a relief for him, and I'm sure the Pacers are thrilled to know that. So it is a left ankle sprain, but he will not be playing this weekend, it sounds like, almost certainly. When I asked him if there was any chance he would play in those games, he said, from what I've been told and listening to the medical staff, they're telling me they would rather be cautious with it. The road trip is the goal. So it sounds like he will not be playing at home at all this weekend, which, huge bummer for him, right? He said it was an emotional day because he hasn't played since January 14th. He missed the last 39 games last year, and he had some family in town because it was his first game in a while, first game of the season. So that obviously sucks for him, and it sucks for the Pacers, who are losing their best defensive player and maybe one of their 3 best players in the whole team this season. But the docs say, whether that's team docs, his docs, whoever, the road trip is plausible. It's a longer-ish road trip. Shams Charania reported a little, he said, miss over a week was the wording he used in his tweet, I believe. And so this, assuming that's from Wednesday, just over a week, or even from today, Thursday, would be the ESPN game the Pacers play in Washington against the Wizards. So that's a potential return opportunity. This road trip is pretty long. It's 8 days in length, 5 games. They play in Philly, in Chicago, in Washington, and then in Brooklyn twice. And it spans like 8 days. So saying on the road trip could mean a lot of things. I'd imagine, though, that you wouldn't see him till at least mid next week. I doubt he would play against Philly next Monday. But that is just me reading between the lines of reporting and what Myles Turner has said to us. So another thing that we don't know for sure, but I would guess based on who was wearing what jerseys in practice and how guys were talking about what their role will be going forward, that the continued starting front court in Turner's absence will be Jalen Smith slides up to the 5 instead of starting at the 4, and then Terry Taylor comes in as the starting 4. That way they get some stockiness and the best possible rebounding with their front court. And Smith just had a horrible first half on Wednesday and then a pretty good second half. So if he can figure out what went right in the second half and maybe extend that to a full game, that would look like a solid enough starting 5 given the resources they have available. And TT is their stockiest power forward, I think Terry Taylor is, even though they have some other maybe a little bit better defenders at this time in terms of girth, and not in an insulting way, just kind of power. I think that's a fine choice. But in general, I think something the Pacers need to do is, with Turner out, go a little bigger, right? And I saw this criticism a little bit from fans of Carlisle's rotations in this game against the Wizards, that they didn't go a little bigger. I asked them about this at practice because they spent all preseason and training camp with Jalen Smith starting at the 4 and Turner at the 5. That's a big group. that is naturally a bigger group. And then as soon as Turner gets hurt, they go away from that. And I don't know if it was never, but I'm pretty sure it was never, had more than one big in the game on Wednesday. So they kind of drifted away from that. And basically what I mean by that is Isaiah Jackson plus another big, right? I don't think Jalen Smith plus Goga or Ijax plus Goga would have made a ton of sense. But either way, they did not go bigger in that game. I asked Carlisle about it. He said that was a matchup thing. So I think it's possible against a Spurs team, for example, that has some more size that they go with Zach Collins, Gorgie Jang, Jakob Poeltl in their rotation in their opening night game, that they could get the 2 bigs out there a little bit. Plus, I think that the defense they'll get from Isaiah Jackson could be useful against Detroit. We'll talk about that in the third segment. So they might go bigger this weekend. I think they should for a few minutes every game. But in terms of the immediate starting lineup ripple effects, I think Terry Taylor and Jalen Smith is a fine choice. And Carlisle said that the Wizards' choice of rotation was matchup-based, right? With Kuzma at the 4, for example, since he is a more athletic perimeter-based guy, it made more sense to have perimeter-based guys on him. I think that makes a lot of sense. I understand the thought of going big being better, especially given how the game went and given how the Pacers performed in preseason. But I also understand what Carlisle's saying when the other team's forwards are Avdia, Kuzma, Hachimura kind of guys. Then it makes sense to go with what they did. So I believe that there will be small tweaks, I guess, to who gets how many minutes and stuff. But the biggest ripple effect of any will be that the Pacers defense will be much, much worse without Myles Turner. I think that was very obvious in some key stretches for the Pacers against the Wizards. And they only, air quotes, gave up 114, but it looked a lot sloppier than that, and the Wizards' second unit just sort of fell apart at times to not make that number higher. Other injuries, much smaller scale than Turner's, of course. Chris Duarte, who got popped in the face, infection control during Pacers-Wizards, probably just a bloody thing because he was not he was at practice. He participated in practice, and he's not even on the injury report. So basically no concussion there. I'm guessing he was just bleeding a lot and couldn't come back in. So he good to go. Jalen Smith listed questionable again with his tendonitis in his knee that he was talking about with me and a couple reporters in the locker room pregame on Wednesday. He said he's fine. I'd imagine he'll play tomorrow, but he is listed questionable. Aaron Nesmith also listed questionable. I have no idea if anything has changed with him, but he was able to go and was getting some shots up when we got into the St. Vincent Center. And Daniel Tice remains out. He's got right knee soreness. So beyond his resting, I think that's more of the reason he's been sitting out recently after the Eurobasket run he had, is that he is dealing with knee soreness. I don't know how bad it truly is. Like, let's say another one of the Pacers centers gets hurt over this weekend before Turner comes back. They say, hey, Tice, we need you to suit up. We'll see. That stuff is all kind of floating up in the air. Maybe Tice questions can come tomorrow or Saturday. So that's the injury update. Wow of the Pacers. I don't know where that wow just came out of my mouth from. I was trying to come up with the right word. But hey, maybe I'll use wow to talk about Pacers injuries this season. We'll have to see when this stuff can be updated and how it matters. We'll, of course, talk about any updates on Monday, should they be important enough to merit a full segment, as this did. And again, big thanks to Myles Turner for talking with us directly about his injury. I very much appreciate when players do that. Let's talk about Kevin Pritchard making a pretty long statement and 2 contract extensions that didn't happen by the Pacers earlier this week. I kind of glossed over them given the timing of the Pacers playing games, but I would like to fit them in a segment because it's basically the last thing of the Pacers offseason. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net, your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth analysis on every game, all over at betonline.net. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. If you're interested in some football lines for this weekend and you're from Indiana like me, Colts playing the Titans in Tennessee. Titans favored by 2. Titans beat the Colts earlier this season. Big game for the Colts. And my Hoosiers, who desperately need a win to get back in the bowl eligibility chase. Not favored against Rutgers in Rutgers. Yikes. If you're not favored against Rutgers, you're probably not very good. Rutgers 3-point favorites in that game. All that and more over at betonline.net, plus other sports, MLB, as it winds down, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head over to that website or use your mobile device to learn more because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, the Bucks beat the Sixers. Great game. The opposite of most NBA games these days. With a 90-88 final score, Kane Pittman from Locked On Bucks will break down that game for you. Make that your second listen today. Hear about Giannis's season debut. All right. So the last off-season thing the Pacers had to do was extensions deadlines this Monday. Once they picked up the rookie scale options, the only thing on the calendar before the season started left was extensions. And we glossed over it a little bit talking with Rhett Bauer on Tuesday. But Goga Bitadze was up for a rookie scale extension, and Buddy Hield was up for a veteran extension. And Myles Turner also was up for an extension, but he can be extended during the season, whereas Bitadze and Hield cannot. So I considered those 2 players off-season moves, whereas Turner can be extended anytime throughout this upcoming season. But there was a deadline Monday, and it was the final offseason thing before the season started. But given the end of the preseason, the start of the regular season, and a game happening, it kind of got glossed over by me because it was like the 6th most important thing happening to the Pacers this this week. So let's talk about a little bit about it, even though I feel like most people understand why those extensions didn't happen. No extensions for either Goga Bitadze or Buddy Hield. I believe that was the most likely outcome all along. The deadline was Monday for both. It was like late afternoon for Goga and midnight for Buddy. So let's talk about Goga first. I think that everyone understands why there's no extension between Bitadze and the Pacers. And if you're a rookie, or a guy in a rookie scale deal, rather, who's in a situation that maybe isn't perfect for you from an on-court perspective, you're buried in the rotation, or you aren't playing your ideal position or something like that, it's not always the best to chase money or to chase that spot for longer. So for Goga, who is the Pacers' 4th center, now that Jalen Smith clearly will be starting at the 5 with Myles out. Goga did play pretty well in the opener, but in general, kind of far down the depth chart. He a fresh start would be helpful for him to potentially be in a rotation somewhere, right? So it didn't make a ton of sense for him to even want one, and it's super rare for rookie scale extensions to be less than the mid-level exception value. It's insanely rare. In fact, I think I saw on Dunked On, Dan Feldman said that Nasir Little had his extension that he just signed with the Portland Trail Blazers will be the second lowest percentage of the salary cap rookie extension ever. It's so unusual that rookies sign the kind of extensions that Nasir Little just signed, and that is still, I think, more value than Goga's worth on the market. And so if you're the Pacers, why do you need to lock up a depth big when you have a crutch of restricted free agency to keep him next summer? In general, basically every single factor at play said it makes no sense for the Pacers and Goga to pursue an extension unless Goga was willing to take like a 4-year deal at the minimum, which, again, even then, maybe they wouldn't have considered it. So, like in the worst case scenario for no extension playing out for the Pacers would be that Goga is fantastic this season, right? That's the worst case scenario. And then he becomes expensive next summer, but he would be a restricted free agent, right? So if he has this fantastic season, I'm sure a team with a ton of cap space would be more than willing to pay a good player, especially a younger team. So there was just no incentive for the Pacers to try to lock this up to clean up their cap sheet when they have team control still next summer. So this one made no sense for either party and didn't get done. That makes sense. Buddy Hield was a little different because it's a veteran extension, and he has 2 years left on his deal, so it wouldn't even have kicked in for a couple more years. Pretty similar situation to Brogdon outside of a key factor here. The Pacers were trying to win last year when they locked up Brogdon and attached the length of his contract to Rick Carlisle's and Domantas Sabonis's and made it closer to Myles Turner's. Right? Like that made a lot more sense for what the perceived timeline of the Pacers was, whereas Buddy Hield does not match the Pacers' timeline, largely due to his age, but for a couple other reasons as well. And the big reason for him is he didn't become extension eligible in the offseason until a little later. And so by the time he was, if he had signed one, he wouldn't be tradable for 6 months. And that would have gone past the trade deadline, similar to what happened with Brogdon last year where he couldn't be traded because of his extension. So Buddy Hield getting an extension with the Pacers would also have made, unless it was a 1-year extension that was like the exact salary that he makes 2 years from now, then he, I guess, could have been traded. But why would he take that? So there was no reason to do that for the Pacers because the flexibility is nice. He has a lot of years left on his deal, and if they were trying to be good, maybe they would have tried to keep him around. But there's no point to make him untradeable and make his contract move into his mid-30s, and he's already a little overpaid. Very rarely, I can't remember any, honestly. Very rarely do veterans take an extension where their salary goes downward in future seasons, unless it's just the percent decreases, but they get a big bump in the first year. So all the factors for Buddy Hield also said, I mean, maybe he would have liked to stay. I don't know how much he loves the Pacers specifically for a long-term fit for him, but it made no sense for the Pacers to even want to pursue that. So that is the arguments for the extensions. There are none for either player to really have gotten one, and they didn't, which made all the sense in the world. And with that, that's it. Fiend. The Pacers offseason done, which makes sense because they played a regular season game. But in theory, the last couple deadlines for the offseason are really kind of bleeding into the season with extension deadlines and rookie scale team options. But the Pacers are done with all that. So the only non-trade thing to think about for a while is a Myles extension, if he's willing to take one during the season, and if they want to move on from non-guaranteed guys and sign someone else, but I don't see why they would want to do that for a while anyway. So Pacers roster all done, Pacers moves all done, not a lot to talk about on that front until roughly mid-December when the trade market opens up a little bit. Speaking of moves and Pacers moves, let's talk about the front office a little bit because Kevin Pritchard put out a message to fans. He tweeted it, or excuse me, he didn't tweet it. The Pacers tweeted it, which was interesting. Scott Agnes wrote in Fieldhouse Files about it. He found it in they put out these game pamphlets at every game. It's like a little tiny, it's hard to explain. If you've been to a sporting event, you know what I'm talking about, but it's a little pamphlet about the game and previewing the game and stuff, and this thing from Kevin Pritchard was in it. So KP puts out this statement about the team and speaking to fans before the season starts. Scott put this in his story, but I also cannot recall this happening before. So this was news to me because it's something new and interesting that this even came out. But to me, the Pacers, this is different. Him putting out this statement is different. And the Pacers are different. They did a big direction change. They're young, right? Vegas says they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And, you know, you'd have to go back over a decade to the last time the Pacers were projected to be, projected to miss the playoffs. And Even then, they were at least in the mid-30s in wins projections. So, like, this is totally new for a ton of fans. Like, you could be in your 30s and have never seen the Pacers start a season with this low of expectation. So, in general, as they go through direction change and things look different, I understand wanting to do something different and getting this out. And KP sharing team mission with fans is always good. And explaining your direction, I think, is good for fans. So, here is the second through fourth paragraphs, the part that I think would be most interesting to fans. This is from Kevin Pritchard to Pacers fans. Quote, "Our goal is ambitious, but we are excited about our direction. Through a series of trades, free agency, and the NBA draft, we have fundamentally reconstructed our roster, in the process becoming younger, faster, and more athletic, while maintaining the flexibility to take advantage of opportunities when we can continue to add to our team. There will undoubtedly be some growing pains along the way. However, our players have an unwavering desire to learn and an undeniable joy for the game and each other that will be evident when you watch them compete. They will continue to interact with our fans, embrace our community, and in the true spirit of Hoosier hospitality, they will give back in ways both big and small. Along with Coach Carlisle and his staff, we're excited and optimistic about the present and future of this organization. More than anything, we are looking forward to the atmosphere at Gainbridge Fieldhouse this season, which remains one of the best venues and environments in professional sports. We're confident this team will match your energy and excitement on a nightly basis, bring you to your feet with an up-tempo, fast-paced style of play that we haven't seen in quite some time." So that was Kevin Pritchard to fans. I thought that was all noteworthy and interesting that they highlighted, one, the type of stuff they want to add in terms of younger, faster, more athletic. They talked about athleticism and shooting a lot this offseason. They talked about flexibility and optionality a lot, and this is their new direction. But I think this sort of signals that they know, hey, fans, we want to tell you that we kind of noticed that we might not be as good, but it's going to be really fun. And that up-tempo, fast-paced style is, from a fan perspective at least, I would imagine, for most at least, the most fun style to watch for a team that's not going to win a lot of games. You'll see the Spurs this weekend, and maybe they beat the Pacers because the Pacers' defense is going to be very rough without Myles especially, but they are not a fast-paced, up-tempo, high-scoring young building team. There will be definitely a difference of style and attractiveness of team on the court. Scott wrote about this. I wrote about this on SI. If you want to read the statement in full and some general thoughts about it from either of us, that would be a good way to go. And that's it. Fiend, offseason done. I don't have to talk about offseason. Oh, I actually wrote a story in Forbes about Kevin Pritchard and the Pacers' new direction as well. Okay, now, Fiend, that is officially the end of offseason chatter. Moves will be discussed as they are rumored and reported going forward, but it's about the games now. It is about the games. And speaking of the games, the Pacers have two this weekend, a back-to-back at home against the lowly Spurs and Pistons. Can the Pacers beat both of these teams? What is there to watch for in these games? Looked a little bit at the film and numbers behind these teams and their season openers to give you some stuff that I think is noteworthy. Before we talk about those two games, though, let me tell you guys about Acre Pro. When it comes to land sales, it pays to have experts in your corner. Acre Pro Midwest Farm Group are your local farmland specialists. With decades of experience in Indiana agriculture, no one knows the market better. Whether you're doing a 1031 exchange, expanding your operation, or selling a row crop farm, your local Acre Pro agent will walk the land with you and ensure the deal is done right. Great service is just the beginning with Acre Pro. They also provide unparalleled land data, including soil ratings, elevation, flood zones, and land valuation across parcels so that you get the full picture up front and can be confident in the entire land market. Your agent will cater to each of your individual needs and help you navigate the complexities of buying and selling land so the process is made simple. Experience the ease of Acre Pro by working with farmland specialists like Kyle Rule, Brady Hammond, Neil Herr, and Kyle Spray. Visit acrepro.com or call 765-587-3185 and talk to your local land expert today. Again, acrepro.com and 765-587-3185. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Kawhi Leonard, kind of back, coming off the bench for the Clippers. Dime Dropper's going to have you covered over at Locked On Clippers. Go check him out. New host here on the Locked On Network. Clippers playing their first game tonight against the Lakers. Speaking of not any of those teams, Pacers, 2 games this weekend. One against the Spurs, who in my eyes are the worst team in the league, and one against the Pistons. Fun weekend for some nostalgic Pacers fans. You get to see the Pacers take on Doug McDermott on Friday and then Bojan Bogdanovic on Saturday. So lots of interesting stuff coming up in these games. Like I just said, the Spurs are my pick for the worst team in the league. I think they have interesting pieces to grow into and be better in the future, but they are right now. So looking at their opening night game, they played the LaMelo Ball-less Hornets, gave up 129 points, only scored a 102, really struggled in the first half really. They were down by 21 at halftime. So they're a really interesting team because Keldon Johnson can kind of create, and that's it, in their starting five, right? He had 20 points and 11 rebounds in their opening night game, and they had they had 6 guys in double figures. They're not slouches in terms of scoring. They just don't have a ton of good creators. Their assist leader was Josh Primo, their second-year guard, off the bench with 5. Like, they have some okay self-starters in terms of scores, but not the best setup men. So they have like a ton of unique and interesting defenders. Their whole starting 5, really. Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Jakob Poeltl, Devin Vassell, Trey Jones, and some, Josh Richardson off the bench. Like, they have some interesting defensive players on this team, but they have no creation. Absolutely no creation for others on this team. So first note I typed for this game. If the Pacers defense looks bad against the Spurs, that's a big yikes. And obviously with no Turner, there are going to be times where their defense looks bad. But, if they give up over 120, that would be a concerning defensive performance to me. And there already are concerns about this team's defense, how they can defend, how they will defend this season. But I think especially given the context of the Spurs roster, I will, have even more concerns that the Pacers struggle to stop them. That said, if they have a hot shooting night, that's different, right? It's process-based. If they're getting a ton of looks at the rim like the Wizards did, that is concerning given what the Spurs roster is. Now, the other thing is the Spurs defense is actually kind of good. So they're kind of the opposite of what the Pacers are going for in terms of young and how they're going to push. So, can Halliburton and Mathurin, break down this defense and create points for the team? McConnell, right? Heald, Duarte, all these guys who will, in theory, be tasked with some off-the-dribble stuff. Can they break down this defense? If they can, I think the Pacers should win this game, but it will be an interesting battle of yin and yang, where one team is young, building on the offensive side, like Kevin Pritchard said, going for the fun up-tempo style, and the Spurs are not doing that in their young sort of rebuilding time. So it'll be a fun game. I think shooting will be really important for the Pacers. Jakob Poeltl, most underrated defensive player in the league, probably, or close to it. Definitely the most underrated rim protector. So it's going to be important to shoot well when he's in there and when he's out. And when the second unit's out there for the Spurs, it's going to be important to try to get to the rim and score. Could be a very big Ben Mathurin game, right? Benedict Mathurin, if he can attack the Spurs second unit, get to the rim, put pressure on the Poeltl-less moments, that'll be big for the Pacers. I think they should win. Spurs are one of the few teams that I think the Pacers are better than, like even on paper this year. So I think the Pacers should win that one, but depending on how it looks and what goes on, if they don't win, we'll change my tune when reviewing that game. 2, they play a second game this weekend, Detroit. Detroit is scrappy and cool and fun, and if you have not watched the Pistons yet this year, which they've only played one game, but if you find some time to catch some tape of Pistons magic if you can. Pistons are fun and awesome, and they have a ton of players that are just cool, including their leading scorer on opening night, ex-Pacer Bojan Bogdanovic. The Pistons are the opposite of the Spurs in that their starters can effing score, man. Like, that team can do some damage. 19 points for Jaden Ivey, 18 points for Cade Cunningham, 24 for Bojan. Saddiq Bey, who had a 50-point game last year, only had 8, right? Like, they've got weapons. And Cade Cunningham had 10 assists. Like, they have ways to create for others. Jaden Ivey can do it a little bit as well. Killian Hayes had 5 assists in only 16 minutes. They are fun and talented on offense, and that will be tricky for the Pacers without Myles especially. And I don't think the Pacers will have an answer for Cade. That they struggled a little bit with Beal, although they had some okay moments. Cade is a bigger creator, right? I don't think they're going to have a good answer for him. I think Duarte will be the best option, or Nesmith for some stretches, but they are not going to have a good answer for Cade Cunningham. So they might have to try to track meet this Pistons team. It's going to be tough, which means a big players to watch in this game, for me at least, like it is Mathurin against the Spurs, will be Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson, right? If there's going to be a lot of perimeter attack coming from the Pistons, who shouldn't have too much trouble beating the porous Pacers defense on the perimeter, the guys around the rim are going to have to do a good job of deterring shots, or at least guiding them somewhere where the shot is a little more challenging, or they're at least thinking about passing out. It's going to be very important for Smith and Jackson to play well on the defensive end, and Batadze if he plays against Detroit, if the Pacers want to keep up. Because there's some tough matchups, and rim protection will definitely be needed against a pretty potent Pistons offense. And this will be the game, I referenced this in the first segment, that if the Pacers want to go bigger, this is the time to do it. I think Isaiah Jackson can, at least, a lot of us have seen Bojan Bogdanovic play a lot. Isaiah Jackson can, in theory, keep up with him if he's at the 4. Saddiq Bey, if he plays the 4, it might be a little tough, but in general, they don't have the fastest guys at the 4 when they do go to a perimeter-based second unit. So if you're going to go with Isaiah Jackson at the 4 for the first time this season, this would be the game to do it. I think that you could get an advantage on the interior or in pick and rolls in a way that you couldn't against some other teams that they're playing, and it could not hurt them on the defensive end. This is, I think, a game where you might see that for the first time. And, when Cade's not out there, their creation for others relies on some younger guards. I think the Pacers have to win the minutes with Cade out if they want to win. And some forwards are going to need to create because the Pistons' wing defense is kind of weak. Whether that's Duarte healed, Nesmith dribbling like he did in the preseason, they're going to need that if they want to win. There's a lot of ifs for the Pacers, but if they get some combination of a wing attack or interior defense or just a good shooting night in general, I think they can beat the Pistons. I would probably favor Detroit, but in general, that will be a pretty fun game, I think. I think the Pacers beat the Spurs, and I'm kind of TBD on Detroit, but if they could be 2-1 after this weekend, given the context of the start of their season with injuries and their upcoming road trip, I think that would be a pretty sweet spot for them to be in terms of growing confidence, growing as a unit, and heading on to a tough road trip. They've got some tough opponents coming up. Thank you, everybody, for listening this week. Pacers season is back. I can tell there's a little bit more interest in this team. We'll, of course, be back next Monday reviewing these two games, the big storylines from the weekend, and talking about the 76ers, who the Pacers play on Monday. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. Everybody, have a great weekend. If you want to talk Pacers with me, comment on the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or tweet at me at TEastNBA or this podcast at Locked On Pacers. We'll be back Monday, like I said, talking Pacers, whatever comes up this weekend for them. Till then, everybody, have a great weekend.